Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kabbalah of Meaning, our 6-week journey uncovering Jewish wisdom for finding the purpose that connects all parts of life. Today's lesson is generously co-sponsored, I should say, by Dr. Mark Essenstein and Dr. Mickey Butnick, who will both be here this evening in person. And the title of today's lesson, Lesson 2, is To Make or Not to Make Meaning. It's a very powerful lesson. There's a lot to discuss. So if I can ask you to open up your textbooks, we are on page 36. And we're going to start with an exercise. All right? What I'm going to ask you is a very fun thing. You can either do it on page 36 or it's on the screen in front of you. There are two tools on the screen in front of you, or on the page on page 36. I'd like you to ask me what I'd like to come up with. I'm not telling them to you. Each of these tools has a function. If you can describe to me what you think the function is of each of these tools. Just get creative. There's no right or wrong answers. We're just trying to do an exercise here, and we're going to come back to this later on in the lesson. Dave, you want to get started? What do you think?
Well, the one on the right looks like it could be used to pulverize something, nuts, grains, to
Okay.
just. The one on the left, I don't know, maybe to put a candle on the little base there.
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to take a stab at this? Ron, what do you think these tools are for?
One on the right's a nutcracker.
A nutcracker. Okay.
The one on the
similar to
left.
what Dave said. Dave was saying more of like a crusher. You're saying like a cracker. Okay, same idea.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
on the left.
The one on the left, I go with him also. It looks like something, a candlestick holder.
Candlestick holder. Okay. Anybody have any other opinions that they want to share before we dive into the lesson? All right. Let's leave it like this, shall we? Okay, we're going to come back to this shortly. You're going to see why this is such an important point. Let's get back to our discussion about meaning, shall we? For argument's sake, let's try a different way of approaching the whole conversation we've been having about meaning in life. For argument's sake, let's say there's no meaning in life. Don't you think that would make life a little easier, simpler? If there's no meaning, we're free to be free, be merry, just have a good time, pleasure, enjoy yourself. In fact, there's an acronym. I shouldn't say an acronym. There's a street that's just one block south of me. Does anybody know what it's called? It's the same street that Rabbi Hanoka is on the corner of. He's on the corner of Mar Vista, and to the best of my knowledge, it's the only block in Pasadena that has that name. Anybody?
Walnut?
Not Walnut. Walnut is the street that Chabad is on. So Rabbi Hanoka is one street south, right? He's on the corner of Mar Vista and, anybody? It's a tiny little street. I think it's the only street like that entirely. The street name causes, I've never seen an accident, but it causes a lot of sharp, short stops. I often see people come to a short stop, get out of their car, take a selfie with the street sign, get back in the car, keep going. Usually younger people. The street sign is YOLO, okay? It's YOLO Street. Does anybody know what YOLO stands for? Svetlana, there you go. Spoken like a true teacher. For sure your students will keep you young, if nothing else. Anybody else? Mark, what does YOLO stand for?
I don't know.
YOLO stands for you only live once. Okay? And it's if you search it up on social media, you'll come up with all sorts of pictures of people doing completely stupid and ridiculous things. Not even always stupid and ridiculous, definitely pleasurable. Oh, I know I'm overweight, but I'm having this ice cream because YOLO, you only live once, right? Or I'm going to jump off a cliff with only whatever, I don't know, cliff jumping and whatever, and hopefully I'll land in the right spot in the water so that I don't smash my skull, right? Why? Because YOLO, you only live once. It's a free-spirited attitude where, like, if life has no meaning, if there isn't really a purpose, then I may as well just enjoy myself as much as I can. You know what another pop culture reference that says? The bucket list. Anybody ever heard the concept called the bucket list? The bucket list, first of all, clearly making very light of life, if the only way you can refer to the end of life is kicking the bucket, right? You can go look up the origin of that expression. But a bucket list is essentially, listen, before I die, I want to do all sorts of pleasurable and enjoyable experiences, so I better do all these things before I die. The truth is that this is it would seem to be a very legitimate attitude towards life. And believe it or not, the same wisest of all men that we quoted last week, King Solomon, describes his attitude in life in Ecclesiastes as this attitude. David Morrison, if we can ask you to get us started. On page 38, text 1a, is King Solomon describing his experiment of enjoying life to the fullest.
I amassed great wealth. I built homes, planted vineyards. I designed gardens and orchards filled with every kind of fruit tree. I made reservoirs to water entire groves of trees. I acquired male and female servants and had more cattle, herds, and flocks than anyone before me in Jerusalem. I piled up silver and gold and the treasures of kings and provinces. I brought in male and female singers and every luxury people could desire, chests and chests of it. I became wealthier than anyone who came before me in Jerusalem, and I still had my wisdom. I didn't hold back from anything my eyes wanted. I didn't deny myself any pleasure. I took joy in everything I achieved, but in the end, that joy was all I really got from it. Then I looked back at all I had worked for, everything I had built and gained, and it was all pointless.
Exactly.
Just chasing the wind, nothing truly lasting under the sun.
Thank you, David. Modern psychology has a term for this as well. Anybody ever hear the term hedonic treadmill? In other words, it seems that there's a lot of research to the fact that we experience a surge of pleasure, a surge of satisfaction when we achieve some sort of a material success, like whatever, buying your dream home, your luxury car, or whatever it is, or even just going out to eat and spending a lot of money on an upscale dining experience, whatever it is. But it doesn't seem that boost lasts. It's like a momentary high, and then we come down from that high, or even if we continue the high, we get used to it, and we don't. It doesn't seem to satisfy us. The void is there once again right afterwards. So psychologists call this hedonic adaptation. In other words, that to quote it from the Talmud says that Mishi yesh lo mana rotza masayim, that if somebody has $100, they will want $200. Mishi yesh lo masayim, and if somebody has $200, rotza arba meos, now he wants 400. In other words, it's not that there is an objective barometer of how much money we're looking for, or how much pleasure we're looking for, or what a nice house looks like. What is a nice house to you now and is your dream house, and then you buy it, will not be enough for you once you live in it and once you get used to it, etc. There's going to be another thing, another pleasure to pursue afterwards. People basically just reset, it seems like, to their base level of happiness, whatever that base level of happiness is, genetics, personality, whatever it is, and then so they might experience a momentary high, and then they go back down to their base level, and this is what psychologists refer to as the hedonic treadmill. So King Solomon is experiencing this. Right, so let's go back to him. Ron, if I can ask you to continue reading for us, text 1b. He turns to wisdom. He's like, maybe if I can get more wisdom in my life, he was a very wise man, but maybe if I can acquire more wisdom, maybe I can find joy in that. Go ahead, Ron.
I turned my thoughts to understanding wisdom and also madness and foolishness. I saw that wisdom is better than foolishness, just as light is better than darkness. A wise person sees where they are going, but a foolish stumbles in the dark. But I also realized that the same fate awaits them both. So I thought, if I'll end up just like the fool, what's the point of being wise? And I saw that this too is meaningless, because neither the wise nor the foolish are remembered for long. In time, both are forgotten, and in the end, the wise person dies just like the fool. That made me hate life. Everything happening under the sun seemed so pointless, just chasing the wind.
This is such a powerful text. It's made most powerful, by the way, by understanding who King Solomon was. I just want to remind you guys, we discussed last of it, I want to remind you what his resume is, right? King Solomon reigned from 863 to 787 BC. He was the king of the Jewish people in Israel. He brought an unprecedented peace to the land of Israel. He fortified the infrastructure, the trade, the military of the land of Israel. By the way, he established strategic alliances with neighboring kingdoms that to date are considered like unmatched. He composed thousands of proverbs and songs. We spoke about some of the books that he published, right? That till today are canonized as part of our 24 books of Tanakh, right? He constructed the first holy temple. Obviously, we can't forget that, right? King Solomon had a tremendous amount of accomplishment under his belt, and yet somehow he still feels meaningless. So just like he says, we can say the same thing. If King Solomon tried so hard, got all the pleasure in the world, got all the wisdom in the world, accomplished many things in the world, right? And yet he still feels empty, then why should I bother doing everything he did? I'm going to feel empty anyways, right? So so this is where this begins to feel like an exercise in futility. And by the way, this fact is not lost on the biblical commentators. Text 2 is from one of the classic commentary on Kohelet, where they're basically pointing out that the resume is exactly what makes his point powerful. They ask why Kohelet, which is the euphemism by which, whatever, the nickname by which King Solomon is being known here in this book. They ask why it has to be repeated again here. Phil, if I can ask you to read for us, please, text 2 on page 42. Meaningless world. Don't forget to unmute yourself. There you go.
Futility of futilities, said Kohelet. Futility of futilities, all is futile. Ecclesiastes 1:2. If another person had said this, we would have said they never amassed even 2 coins in their life, yet they speak about the wealth of the world and declare it futility. But Solomon, about whom it is written, the king made silver in Jerusalem as abundant as stones, is indeed suited to render all as futility of futilities. Behold, Solomon, the ruler, the powerful one, the wise, authored this entire book to render the whole world as meaningless and to tell us that everything is utterly futile.
So the validity of this observation is only as strong as the accomplishments of the observer, right? So so let's say you just heard this statement from somebody. Futility of futilities, everything is futile, right? Your automatic assumption is this is a man who probably hasn't accomplished much in his life. That's why he's saying that everything is futile. Or let's say even I tell you, yeah, this is a statement that the homeless guy on my street corner made. He's been completely unsuccessful. He was born to bad luck and his whole life he was unsuccessful. You'd be like, okay, but my life is meaningful. Why? Because I've done X, Y, and Z. But it turns out that it's the exact opposite. King Solomon is the paradigm of success, at least by any barometer that modern psychology seems to have for us today. Whether materialistic success or wisdom, right, in terms of amassing knowledge, and yet at the end of it all, he seems to say that everything is futile. So the million-dollar question is, what was he missing? Now it turns out that millennia later, the famed 19th century Russian novelist Leo Tolstoy struggled with a very similar question. In his 1882 work, which is called A Confession, which was penned well after he achieved much success in universal acclaim. I didn't go to look when he wrote War and Peace, but definitely this is after many of his very successful works. He writes this text, which is so telling. Svetlana, you have your book? No, not yet. Okay. So, Mark, if I can ask you to read for us, you're muted. You have to unmute yourself. We can't see you. We can't hear you. Mark, you with us? Maybe not. Okay. So, Dave Barron, we're back to you. Text 3 on page 43. Questions of meaning. This is Leo Tolstoy writing.
5 years ago, something very strange began to happen to me. At first, I experienced moments of perplexity and arrest of life, as though I did not know what to do or how to live, and I felt lost and became dejected. But this passed, and I went on living as before. Then these moments of perplexity began to recur oftener and oftener, and always in the same form. They were always expressed by the questions, what's it for? What does it lead to? I understood that it was so casual in disposition, but something very important. And if these questions constantly repeated themselves, they would have to be answered. And I tried to answer them. The questions seemed such stupid, simple, childish questions, but as soon as I touched them and tried to solve them, I at once became convinced that they are not childish and stupid, but the most important and profound of life's questions, and that, try as I would, I could not solve them. Before occupying myself with my Samara estate, the education of my son, or the writing of a book, I had to know why I was doing it. How long, as I did not know why. I could do nothing and could not live. Amid the thoughts of estate management, which greatly occupied me at this time, the question would suddenly occur to me, well, you have 6,000 desiantias of
That's
land
about 2.75 acres each.
in Samara government with 300 horses, and what next? And I was quite disconcerted and did not know what to think. Or when considering my plans for the education of my children, I would say to myself, what for? Or when thinking of fame my works would bring me, I said to myself, very well, you will be more famous than Gogol or Pushkin or Shakespeare or Moliere or than all the writers in the world. And what of it? And I could find no reply at all.
Thank you, Dave. It's a difficult text to read, but it's a question really that we all need to be asking ourselves. Ultimately, as Tolstoy describes in his book, he seriously contemplated suicide, and he actually writes that he struggled and eventually intuitively affirmed God's existence and presence. He states that as soon as he said God is life, life was once again suffused with meaning. But that's not the point that we were getting to here. Which I know sounds ironic, because obviously I'm a rabbi and God should be the ultimate of everything, etc. We're going to get there. But for now, just the point is the question that you cannot really just go about life thinking that it's all about the things that we accumulate or the levels that we can get to. And this,
it's just a small anecdote here.
Mhm.
It's really interesting that his granddaughter is the one who came up with the biology of meaning and happiness. She's
That's fascinating.
His granddaughter is the head of NIDA, has been for many, many years. And she identified one of the ones looking at reward deficiency syndrome, and dopamine is the chemical in the brain that gives that sense of meaning. So it's interesting that she
That is quite
followed up
interesting. Yeah,
on her grandfather. Yeah, Nora
that is
Volkow.
fascinating. But this, I think the most important thing we're trying to get to is the following. Okay, this search for meaning that we see King Solomon and Leo Tolstoy, in other words, people who are highly accomplished. I think we can hope nobody's offended, more accomplished than anybody in this Zoom. This also answers a different question for me, which is a question really that I have at the end of a lesson like last week's lesson, which is really where I want to start today's lesson. If I look around right now at this Zoom, everybody on this Zoom, I know most of you to one degree or another, and I know you to be people who have experienced a tremendous amount of personal growth in your life. Let me pull up the slide, that we can go through them one at a time. I know you to be people who are very productive, either currently or were, and even if you're retired, you're productive in other ways. I know you to be very giving people. I know that firsthand. I have an organization, you guys have donated to my organization to help Jewish education, and I know that you give to other worthy organizations. I know you to be involved in meaningful relationships. Many of you are married. Those of you that are not, you're involved in other meaningful relationships with your parents, with your children. Beautiful. So somehow you're still searching for something more. First of all, that's why you're here at this course. I find myself checking most of these boxes, maybe not every day, and there's probably growth that I can do in every single one of these areas, but still, meaning seems to be about something more than just the 4 check boxes that we made last week. It's not just about that litmus test. And that's why we're starting off by quoting somebody like King Solomon or Lahamdil Leo Tolstoy, because these are people that definitely checked off these 4 boxes. I mean, King Solomon definitely was a growing person. He personally attests to that. He was productive beyond, he was generous beyond, and he was involved in meaningful relationships. So why does he also feel that futility of futilities, everything is futile, right? Obviously, there's something more that we're missing, and the question is, what is that? And that's really the topic of today's lesson, okay? But before we get there, I have to confess something. We've talked a lot about the universal human desire for meaning, and we even gave some answers to it last week. But the truth is that the search for meaning is something that Judaism can contribute to, but it's not something you need to find in Judaism. In other words, here's a confession from a rabbi. If somebody were to come to me and say to me, Rabbi, do I need Judaism in order to live a meaningful life? I would have to answer them with the truth, and it would be absolutely not. You can find meaning in many other ways, which is a big confession coming from a rabbi, and I want to explain what I'm saying. The reason that that is true is because the word meaning implies that we're talking about something subjective. Subjective means I'm here, I have a life, I want to fill my life with meaning. You do not need to turn to Judaism in order to do that. Even the four things we mentioned last week, we turn to Judaism to find them in Judaism, but you can find them elsewhere. Somebody can just spend time meditating on their own and come up with a definition. You know, in order to live a meaningful life, you need to grow. You need to be productive. You need to be involved in a meaningful relationship. And even if you don't come up with them on your own, you can find them elsewhere. You don't need to find them in Judaism. These are not uniquely Jewish ideas. Now, to be clear, Jewish wisdom teaches a lot about meaning, but you don't need to find it from Judaism. And last week we brought a lot of those texts for each of those things. Now, the reason that that's the case is because we've been discussing meaning as something subjective to the person. I am here. I'm living life. How do I fill my life with meaning? Okay. But I'd like to suggest something very radical. And I think many of you are going to find this very surprising. Perhaps the search for meaning is actually a distraction from the real question we should be asking ourselves. What is that question? Let's turn to the Purim story. Just a reminder, for those of you that haven't checked out the Purim story in quite some time, around the year 350 BCE, before the Common Era, the Persian king Ahasuerus makes a party, and in a drunken stupor, he puts his queen to death. When she disobeys his order to appear before him naked and dancing and showing off her body for the rest of the crowd, he puts her to death. Then, in a pageant, which, by the way, was mandatory on participants. In other words, he had scouts going out. If there was a beautiful girl that they saw somewhere, it was mandatory for all the girls to participate in the pageant. He chooses and coerces, because she does not want to, Esther to be his new queen. Her relative Mordechai, who was the leader of the Jewish people at the time, tells her, don't tell anyone that you're Jewish, keep it under wraps. Let's just observe. God has some sort of a plan here. Let's keep the whole thing under wraps. A few years later, the minister, Haman, offers Ahasuerus a fortune of money in exchange for a license to kill all the Jewish people, genocide at its literal definition, and Ahasuerus agrees. And Mordechai becomes aware of this edict of destruction issued against the Jewish people, and now he realizes this must be what God has in mind here. So he sends a message to Esther. He's not living in the king's palace. He's not married to the king. But his relative, Esther, is. And he knows about it. He's one of the only people who knows that Esther is Jewish. So he sends, they had some sort of messenger system, he sends a message to Esther. What is that message? It is text 4a. This is a direct quote from the Megillah. Ron, you have a question, and then we'll ask you to read the text. Go ahead.
Yeah. So his first wife was supposed to parade herself in front of the audience naked.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then was Esther to do that also?
No. This happened one time at the feast. He got drunk. This wasn't an ongoing occurrence. He got drunk. And the Megillah tells us about how there was a whole argument between all of the drunken men. The women of this land are the most pretty. The women of this land are most pretty. The Persian women are the most pretty. The Median women are the most pretty. Whatever, all the different parts of the Persian Empire at the time. And he said, I forget where his wife was from, that I actually think she was Babylonian. Anyways, he says that she was that those women are the most pretty, and to prove it, I'm going to have my wife come and show you that her body is the most pretty. He tells her to come wearing only the royal crown, nothing else. And she refuses, and he has her put to death. Yeah, there's a lot of questions on this story. we got to stay focused there. Now, let's get back to Esther. Yes?
All right.
Esther is the queen. Nobody knows she's Jewish. This genocidal edict is passed, right? And Mordechai realizes this can be Esther's moment. So he sends a message to Esther, who had done nothing yet on her own, to alleviate any suffering for the Jewish people, and now text 4a is the message that Mordechai sends to her. Go ahead, Ron, when you're ready.
Mordecai gave Hatak a copy of the written decree that had been circulated in Shushan, instructing him to show it to Esther and to urge her to go before the king, to plead with him and beg for the lives of her people. Hatak went and delivered Mordecai's message to Esther. Esther then said to Hatak and instructed him to relay her words to Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's province provinces know that anyone, man or woman, who enters the king's inner court without being summoned is subject to death, unless the king extends his golden scepter, granting permission to live. And I have not been summoned to the king in 30 days. Esther's message was conveyed to Mordecai. Mordecai sent back this reply to Esther. Don't imagine that you, of all the Jews, will escape just because you're in the palace. If you remain silent at this moment, relief and deliverance will come for the Jews from another source, but you and your father's house will perish.
I wouldn't say he's threatening her, but I would definitely say that Mordecai is making a strong appeal that it's in Esther's best interest to go to the king. Would everybody agree with that? He's trying to tell her, this is the best thing for you. God wants you to do it. If you don't do it, somebody else will do it, and you'll die, and your family will go down as the family that could have helped but didn't help, right? And don't think that you're going to be saved. Everybody else is going to be fine, but everybody else is going to die, but you, because you're the king's wife, you think you're going to be saved. It's not going to work. He's going to discover that. He has all sorts of opinions where he's basically appealing to her selfishness to a degree. He's saying it's in your best interest to do this. Okay?
Story.
However, Mordecai doesn't stop there. And he adds a second argument. Okay, Ron, why'd you mute yourself? You're still in the middle. Text 4b is the second argument. Just such a time.
And who knows, perhaps you became queen for just such a time as this.
And with this, he takes a much deeper perspective. Until now, he's been almost threatening her, but definitely telling her that it's in her best interest. It's in your best interest to go to the king. This is your people. You got to do it. This is your moment. You would want it, the whole thing, right? And all of a sudden, he takes a much deeper turn. He says, actually, if you think about this from a different perspective, it could be that for this reason specifically, the whole thing happened. That's why you became queen. That's why you were forced to be in the pageant. You didn't want to be there, and you had to marry him, and you don't want to be married to him, and you're married to. Could be the whole thing is for this moment. Your whole life is leading up to this moment. The purpose is for this moment. Okay? Now, I want to point something out very interesting to you. Mordecai has not just used two arguments with Esther. He's used two opposing arguments. Okay? The first argument is, God doesn't need you. This has nothing to do with you. This is much greater than you. And if you want to be part of this, get part of it right now. But God doesn't need you. If it's not you, it's going to be done through somebody else. And then he goes the exact opposite direction. No, he needs you. It's you. You're here in your moment, and you became queen specifically for this moment. It's like, so does God need her specifically? Or does God not really need her? Right? But look what happens. He spends so much more text. Look, 4a is the lengthier one in which he tells her, we don't need you. It's not about you. Right? But then he spends one line saying, maybe this is the purpose of your life. And what happens? That hits a chord. That strikes a chord with Esther. When he says to her, this might be the purpose of your whole life. This might be your life's calling. All of a sudden, Esther responds, and she responds in a big way. Mark, if you can read for us, please, text 4c, which is what Esther does. As soon as she hears those words from Hatach, who's this messenger boy who's going back and forth, she sends back a message with him to Mordecai. Go ahead.
Esther said to reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews who are found in Shushan and fast for me. Do not eat and do not drink for 3 days, night and day. I too, along with my maidens, will fast likewise, and then I will go to the king. Though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish.
Look at the effect it has on her. It's not just that she chooses to go to the king. He manages to get her to live for something that has nothing to do with her life. She's actually willing to die. The first one, he was threatening her with death. You might die, but still you won't go down in history as the person who did the right thing. Now, she's willing to offer death. I'll go to the king, and if I perish, I perish. I don't care if he's so angry at me that he decides to have me put to death. And she has precedent to base her claim on, right? To base her worry on. His previous wife was put to death for much less so than defying an order and an edict that the king did, right? Just for a simple drunken command. But she's willing to go. She's willing to go with that. So what I'd like to do now is take a moment to examine what is the difference between the first argument and the second argument that Mordecai is making to his relative Esther. And I think that herein lies the discovery of a much deeper perspective of this conversation of the search for meaning. The first argument that Mordechai is making to Esther, I would argue, or I'd like to suggest, is subjective. It's all about your benefit. The whole conversation revolves around me. This is my life, Esther says. How does this fit into the sphere of how I make my life meaningful? But then Mordechai comes and he says, let me suggest something else. Maybe instead of looking at this as being about you, maybe you look at this about being something that's outside you, something that's much greater than you, something that's objective meaning. This is the purpose for your creation. It doesn't have to do with you and how you're going to feel in this moment, or even whether you're going to live or not. It has to do with whether you're going to be part of this objective sense of meaning. These two arguments, subjective meaning or objective meaning, can also be phrased in a different way. And I'd like to use these words for the rest of the lesson if we can. It's not a difference that the English language recognizes, like English linguists, I don't think make this difference, but I think it's one that will be so intuitive to you that these words will be better than using words like subjective meaning or objective meaning. Subjective meaning means using the English word meaning. Meaning. I'm looking for meaning in my life, right? Objectively, I'm not looking for meaning, I'm looking for purpose, all right? And there's a big difference between meaning and purpose. Let me explain. Meaning is something that comes after the thing you're looking to be meaningful, right? Think about the way that I did the exercise with you guys at the beginning of today's lesson, right? We started with an item. Now that item is here, we see the two tools in front of us. There must be meaning to that item, right? So the item is here. So therefore, afterwards, I'm going to look for the meaning. Purpose says, no. The purpose comes first. I have a need in my head. And then afterwards, I'm going to try and fill that need with a purpose, with the thing. So when a human being searches for purpose, it's very different than searching for meaning. Searching for meaning is to say, my life is here. My whole life is about the meaning. My life is about me. So therefore, let me try to fill that life with meaning. Let me try and ascribe meaning to that life. Purpose says, no, there's a higher purpose. And this is what Mordechai is challenging Esther to do. Your life actually started because there was a purpose that preceded your life. And now, let's try and discover that purpose. And here you're being handed on a silver platter a moment in time where maybe you can discover that purpose. Let's go back to those two images that we did at the beginning of the two tools that we did at the beginning of today's lesson. Yes? Now I'm ready to reveal them to you. The tool on the right is a real tool. Okay? It is actually a cherry pitter. It's a tool that's meant to pit cherries. The way that it works is you take the cherry, you put it in the cup at the bottom. The top over there is kind of like a plunger. When you squeeze the handles together, the plunger is driven through the center of the cherry. In this way, the pit comes popping out of the bottom and is caught in the cup underneath, and you end up with a beautifully pitted cherry. Okay? That's a cherry pitter. The image on the left is actually an AI-generated image which has no purpose whatsoever. Nobody ever designed such an item. Okay? What is the big difference between the way we look at these things? If you'd like to follow along with me, I'm in the graph on page 48. The sequence is only the beginning of the difference, but the sequence tells us a lot about it. When purpose brings an item, or let's say a human being, when purpose drives the creation of a human being, then the search is not for meaning, the search is for purpose. It's not, oh, this human being exists, therefore we may as well make his life meaningful. Actually, the reverse is true. We're trying to reverse engineer, why did someone create and put a human being here on this earth? Put me on this earth. That's what's happening when you look at a cherry pitter. Somebody tells you that this is a tool. You're not looking for a meaning for the tool. You're looking for the purpose for which the person created the tool. Now you can use it for something else, right? You can use a hammer to massage someone's back, but that's not what it's created for. Right? A hammer is created with a certain purpose in mind. There's an intention that the designer had in mind when they designed the hammer. Similarly, the cherry pitter, the person who, the person who designed the cherry pitter designed it for a specific purpose. And so when you look for the purpose of it, you're looking for something that precedes you're looking for an inherent meaning which precedes the tool itself, which was a purpose which then became expressed in the tool. I'm losing enough words to be able to describe this, but I hope I'm coming across clearly. Meaning, the search for meaning is very different. And this is why I say that the search for meaning may be a distraction from the true search you should be looking for. And I recognize that the name of this course is the Kabbalah of meaning, but from now on, we're elevating our conversation. We are no longer looking for meaning in our lives, we're actually looking for purpose. And this is a very, very powerful idea. Let's take a look at the way Rabbi Lord Dr. Jonathan Sachs, alav hashalom, puts it in text 5. David Morrison, if you can read for us, please. We're on page 49.
Think about it. Every function that was once performed by religion can now be done by something else. In other words, if you want to explain the world, you don't need Genesis. You have science. If you want to control the world, you don't need prayer. You have technology. If you want to prosper, you don't necessarily seek God's blessing. You have the global economy. You want to control power, you no longer need prophets. You have liberal democracy and elections. If you're ill, you don't need a priest. You can go to a doctor. If you feel guilty, you don't have to confess. You can go to a psychotherapist instead. If you're depressed, you don't need faith. You can take a pill. If you still need salvation, you can go to today's cathedrals, the shopping centers of Britain, or as one American writer calls them, weapons of mass consumption. Religion seems superfluous, redundant, de trop. Why then does it survive? My answer is simple. Religion survives because it answers 3 questions that every reflective person must ask. Who am I? Why am I here? And how then shall I live?
And this is where Judaism comes and plays a role that you cannot find elsewhere. This is exactly what Judaism is trying to answer. In other words, remember at the beginning of the lesson I made a confession that meaning you can find elsewhere. Yes, it's true. Meaning you can find in many different ways. Judaism will also suggest meaningful activities to engage in. Judaism encourages giving. Judaism encourages healthy relationships, meaningful relationships. Judaism encourages producing and growing. All the things we discussed last week, which were all in the category of meaning, Judaism encourages us to engage in those things because Judaism also tells us about meaning. But that is not something you specifically, uniquely need Judaism for. Where you need Judaism for is if you would like to elevate your conversation. And you don't want to be talking anymore about how to fill your life with meaning, but rather you'd actually like to surpass yourself. You'd like to live for something greater. You'd like to figure out what existed before I existed. In other words, what is the purpose for which I was created? That's a whole different conversation. And in order to do that, you do need to turn to Judaism. Let's turn to one other great Jewish thinker, Rabbi Avram Kook. Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook is his full name. That he's known as Rav Kook. In text 6, puts it this way. Phil, if you can read for us, please, on page 50.
Before I was created, during all the limitless time that came before, there was nothing in the world that required me. Had I been needed for any purpose or task, I would have existed earlier. The fact that I wasn't created until that specific moment is proof that there was no need for me until then. My existence was not necessary until it was. And when the time came, I was brought into the world to fulfill a role, to contribute something essential to the perfection of existence.
And all of this, thank you, Phil, is obviously only true if you believe in an inherent creator, right? So if you believe in God, which is a Jewish idea, and then by extension, you believe that God put you on this world for a purpose, which is the way that Jewish thinkers look at it, then the day that you were born is not just another day and you happen to come into existence. No, it's the day that God decided the world cannot continue without your contribution to the world. In other words, there's something that you're needed for that now you're going to be born. If you're looking to discover that, you're going to need to turn to Judaism. Because that is not just looking to fill life with meaningful activities or meaningful moments or meaningful, as much meaning as we can. That's looking to discover the purpose for which for which we were created. And that is the Jewish approach. In other words, it changes. It's not what do I find meaningful, Right? That's the selfish approach. That's a very self-centered. It all starts with you. The whole thing revolves around you. My life exists. That's a fact. So therefore, how can I fill it with meaning? It changes the whole approach. The Jewish approach is, what is my purpose? Okay, and now this is going to take us to another very important idea. This isn't just something that applies to human beings, by the way. This is something that applies to everything in creation. Imagine if somebody buys a beautiful Picasso, an original Picasso, a vivid, powerful, priceless piece of art, right? He brings it home and he decides to approach this with a meaning question. So he says to himself, what can I do with this, right? Turns out he has options. He could frame it and hang it in a place of honor, or he could lay it down on the counter and use it as a cutting board, right? Both choices give the painting a kind of meaning. Using a priceless painting as a cutting board is giving it a meaningful existence. It's a very low meaning, but it's a meaningful existence in terms of being a cutting board, right? But with a Picasso, the real goal is the non-fool. The wise thing to do is to actually take it and use it for the purpose for which it was made, to have it align with the purpose for which it was created by this wonderful artist. And that can be asked about anything, right? With Picasso, I think the purpose is kind of obvious, right? With a priceless Picasso, the purpose is kind of obvious. You put it on the wall in a place of honor and you show off to all your friends about it, and you get inspired by it, and other people get inspired by it, etc. Beautiful. But for some reason, when it comes to other areas of our lives, we struggle with that. Think of money, for example. A person is blessed with money, right? You can have two different types of questions about it. And very often people do not ask the question, why do I have the money? Instead, they're busy asking, what can I do with the money? Which is a good and meaningful thing to do, and you should use it for meaningful activities, right? But what if we flip the question, we ask, why do I have the money? Because as Jews, we believe the money was given to us by God, was granted to us by a higher creator. And if that's the case, why do I have the money? And that's the next chart on page 51. You guys see it? This is the point we've been making over the last 10 minutes. That when you're having a discussion about meaning, the conversation begins with me and it ends with me. But when you're having a conversation about purpose by definition precedes me, and by definition I live for something beyond me. So back to the Purim story, just to wrap that up for a moment. Back to the Purim story. This is what Esther means when she says, as soon as she hears from Mordechai a conversation about purpose, that maybe this is the reason for which I'm here, it's not even about her life anymore. It starts to be about something beyond her. She says, I'm actually willing to give my life for it. Okay. It turns out, whoa, don't start yet. Okay. It turns out that now that we've changed the conversation from being not about meaning, rather about purpose, it turns out we also now need to look somewhere else for it. Why? Because when you look for meaning, you can start with yourself and you can try and figure out how to make your life meaningful. But when you're looking for purpose, by its very definition, you need to start outside yourself. And this video is going to illustrate this idea very powerfully, but with someone that's looking for meaning, but ultimately at the end of the conversation looks for purpose. Take a look at this video, you'll see it's a very powerful analog.
Hey, cow, what's the meaning of life?
Here, have some.
Thanks. I'll pass. Parrot, what's the meaning of life?
What's the meaning of life? Oh.
Yeah, that's not helping. Lion, what's the meaning of life?
Life has meaning.
Noted. Moving along. What's that circle?
Take a guess.
A sun? That's it?
Wrong.
Maybe a person?
Nope.
I know, a balloon.
Nice, but no.
If it's not a sun, a head, or a balloon, maybe it doesn't mean anything.
It does, but it's in my mind. I made it for a purpose. You just have to ask me.
Okay, I give up. What is it?
A cake.
A cake?
You kept guessing the circle's meaning. Your answers were clever, but not what I intended. Life is the same. To know the truth, you must ask the one who made it.
A simple parable, but a very powerful idea. When you see something, in this case, the girl sees a circle, you have two questions you can ask. You can ask, how can I make this circle meaningful? There's lots of answers to that. You can make it a sun, you can make it a person, you can make it, I forget all the other examples that she did, right? You can put numbers before it and all of a sudden make it into a much greater number, right? It could be part of the number 1 million if you add a 1 and a couple other zeros beforehand. And it can signify something very great. These are all meaningful things. But there's only one purpose to the circle, and that is the purpose that the painter who painted the circle has in mind for it. The reason I think this is such a powerful, even if it's simple, but a powerful analogy, is because it illustrates for us that if we want to understand the true meaning of our lives, and we want to elevate our conversation from just making our lives meaningful to actually understanding the purpose for which we were designed, we need to look outside of ourselves. It's never going to come from within us. That's why the cow and the lion and the parrot, that's why they struggle to define meaning. Why? Because they're saying, what is meaning of life? I'm eating grass. That must be what meaning is. How do I make that meaningful? I'll make it meaningful in some way, but this is my life. If we elevate the conversation, then what's really happening is we're looking outside of ourselves to see, is there something that precedes me that can actually give me insight into my life? Having introduced this idea, that somebody can have an aha moment where they realize that all their lives they've just been trying to fill their lives with meaning, and that they can really be searching for purpose, which is a much deeper idea. I want to tell you now a story. And this story is essentially a story of somebody who has a real midlife crisis, where his life switches from being a meaningful life to being a purposeful life. Okay? Let me give you the back. It's going to be text 7 for the most part. Dave Barron, I'll ask you to read it for us, but I want to set it up first. Okay, so this is a story that's told by one of the great Hasidim, which means followers or disciples, of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was the first Chabad Rebbe, the founder of Chabad Hasidism, and this individual was a truly pious person and a renowned Torah scholar. He was also very wealthy, and he was very charitable. In fact, the way that I understand it, he was the supporter of a tremendous portion of his family. In other words, his siblings and his siblings' children, he was paying for their weddings. And it was around that time that the wedding of several relatives, family members who he had promised to provide the dowry and provide the wedding expenses, etc., they all came at the same time. And so too were the weddings of 2 of his own daughters, who were already engaged. And he was deeply distraught over his predicament. And my understanding is that he lost a lot of his money. Okay? And he turns to the Alter Rebbe, comes to the Alter Rebbe, to the first Chabad Rebbe, and he tells him of his dire situation. Dave, let's read this very heartfelt and really crisis conversation that he has with the Alter Rebbe. Go ahead.
Hasidic Rebbe, prolific writer and Jewish activist, Rabbi.
No, you're reading about the Rebbe. But if you can read text 7 for us, why are you needed? 52. It's on page 52, but I actually think that's the Hebrew. You can keep going till the English and read the English first, please.
He traveled to the Rebbe, is that it?
Yes.
He traveled to the Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Laidi, and poured out his heart with many tears and deep anguish. If God has seen fit to afflict me with poverty, I accept the judgment, he said. But how can I, God forbid, remain in debt and fail to repay? How can I not fulfill the promises I made to my family and relatives and my daughters' weddings? I made those promises back when I was wealthy. According to our holy Torah, I had every right to make these commitments. If I now fail to keep them, it will be a desecration of God's name. He cried bitterly over the great punishment that he was being made to endure. With great emotion, he begged the Rebbe to arouse abundant mercy on his behalf from the source of true compassion and goodness, that he might repay his debts and fulfill his promises. After that, he said, I'll accept whatever poverty heaven has decreed upon me. He ended his words, Rebbe, I need to repay all my debts. I need to give my relatives and my family members what I promised them. I need to provide for the weddings of my 2 daughters as I promised them. The Rebbe was leaning on his holy arms in deep spiritual absorption, listening to the man's cries and pleas. After some time, the Rebbe lifted his holy head and, still absorbed in that intense spiritual state, said, You speak of what you need, but you say nothing about why you are needed.
The end of the story is that the words of the Alter Rebbe penetrated this man's heart to his very core, and he fell to the floor in a dead faint. And the attendant that was standing by, the door was open. He saw what happened. He called 2 other Hasidim. They brought water. They poured it on him. They roused him. And when he finally regained consciousness, he did not speak to a single soul. He immediately went to the shul, sat himself down, and immersed himself in Torah study and prayer with renewed life and such self-transcendence that he forgot everything else. He had traveled there from a family. He was there for days, filled with joy and vibrant energy, as he was trying to discover his purpose. A few days later, the Rebbe summoned this chassid, blessed him with success, and instructed him to return home and resume his business. And after a short while, he became wealthy again, and he repaid all his debts, fulfilled all his promises, and made his daughters' weddings, and gave even more tzedakah, even more charity than he ever had before. Okay, let's analyze this story. Where had this chassid gone wrong? I made sure to introduce him properly to you. He was a devout chassid. He prayed, he studied, he did mitzvahs, he gave lots of charity. In fact, his entire family was supported on him. I think the answer lies in a subtle but very crucial distinction, and it's the same distinction that we've been making in today's lesson. This chassid was living a life filled with meaning. His life was about him, and his life needed to be filled with meaning. So he was engaged in many different activities, but he was doing them from a meaning perspective, trying to fill his life with meaning. When he came to the Rebbe, his complaint to the Rebbe was from an egotistical, selfish perspective. And I don't mean that in a bad way, by the way. This is not a harsh judgment of him. All of a sudden, I lost all the meaning that I had in my life. Right? What does the Rebbe say to him? The Rebbe turns to him and the Rebbe says, maybe that's the whole message of this situation. Maybe Hashem is sending you a message that you've been living a life full of meaning, but you haven't been doing it for something beyond yourself. You haven't been living a life of purpose. The Alter Rebbe is challenging him with a deeper question. Not what do I need? Not what do I find meaningful? That's become the dirty word now, right? Meaningful. But rather, what am I needed for? Why am I needed? What is the purpose for my creation? Yes? How can I discover that? And that's a much deeper question, and that's available to you. Your purpose is a true purpose, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're healthy, whether you're ill, whether you're thriving, whether you're struggling, whether you have legs or you don't have legs, whether you have arms or you don't have arms, whether you can walk or you cannot walk, whether you're smart or you're not smart, whether you're beautiful or you're not beautiful. It doesn't make a difference. Purpose is something that's God-given. And if that's the case, it surpasses your life and the way that your life is operating right now. Says the Alter Rebbe, maybe you can use this opportunity as a moment for you to actually find what your purpose is in your current situation, which is very different than your previous situation. I want to play another video, okay? This is a video of Rabbi Ezra Shachat, who is also struggling with a similar thing. To him, his life was all about wisdom. His life was all about Torah scholarship. And he turns to our Rebbe, much more recent story, same message. The Rebbe turns to him with the same message. Rabbi Ezra Shachat is the Rosh Yeshiva today. The Rosh Yeshiva means like the dean of the yeshiva in Los Angeles, the Chabad Yeshiva in Los Angeles, known as Yeshivat Or El-Chanan Chabad. And this story changed his life. He was, I think 14, he's going to say, I think 14, 15 years old. Please turn your attention to the video screens.
14, going on 15. I wrote to the Rebbe that I heard a lot of stories about the Alter Rebbe wrote the Shulchan Aruch before he was 20. Shav Shmaitzer wrote the Shav Shmaitzer 18. Shulchan Iger said a speech to the public that all the Gvela had there were amazed. At 13, said even if I learn my best, I'll never get there. So why should I learn? So the Rebbe wrote back. It explained in Tanya in the beginning of the 4th parak that Hasagas HaTorah, what you grasp in Torah, is dependent in the Yecheles Hasagos of Sherish Nafshel Umayis, dependent on your soul, where your soul came from. And also explained in Parak Lamed on the mission of Shval Ruach B'fnei Kol Odom, that you have to be humble in front of every single person. That every single person has his advantage regarding a second person.
Jeder hat sich seine Weide. Und das ist dort der Weide von Mori Hufdin Torin. Ich sehe Koch in Mori Hufdin Torin, dann noch dort der Weide von Talmid Chachom, und ich sehe Koch in Avone Betela. Und in die beide, ich schlug im Kloll, mit dort kamen Dargis. Und das zählt auf den Magis Talmud, auf der Besuche Hanefahre. Was בכלל ist zwischen den Lomden, wir gewinnen mit Arava Magi, größere Lomden von Erd. Okay, du echt, was gesagt hat, mit Kumme, Verbesel, Schelamerle wird nicht monnen bei ihm. Weil was nicht wie der Gorl, wie ein zweiter Gorl, wie ein dritter Gorl, mit monnen bei ihm, was nicht so schade Paare. Und das hat gedacht, beim sein Beschlimmes. Und nicht schälisch nicht Mosse von Mori Hufdin-Tor. Oder von der einheilig Betera, nicht von der zweiten heilig Betera, ist auch zu damit monten das nicht. Nicht mehr monten der Pavis, man will Praven Chassodim, nicht das ist Tachlis Abrischele.
Everybody has to fulfill the intention of the Creator for what he was created. Self-understood, this is only said regarding Zirus Vadofe. But every single Jew is obligated in all Taryag mitzvahs, Talmud Torah, learning Torah, Keneged Kulam. He added that because I might have said to myself, okay, learning is not for me.
Schade ist Hore Zet, als hat nicht im Weg, was zu Eichspruch die Kirche von Aiden, ruft sich auf einen Weg, wo das ist verbunden mit einer speziellen Harmonie, mit einem speziellen Zugang. Er rückt ihm unter eine Arbeit, wo sie nicht seine Arbeit, wo demut das, was darf tun, wird nicht tun.
This is the point that we are making. Every single one of us here on this Zoom has a purpose, a unique purpose for which we were created.
Yeah.
Not meaningful activities that we can engage in. The purposeful activities will automatically be meaningful. And we can run around our whole life and sometimes even be completely misguided by engaging in meaningful activities that are not our purpose. And we have to find the way to actually be able to figure out what our purpose is in life. Not just meaningful activities, but what the purpose for which I was created was. And that is something that we will never be able to find inside of our life. Because if we're continuing to look inside of our life for the meaning of our life, it's an inherent contradiction. It has to come from outside the system. Think of a game of football. Let's see how Rabbi Sachs puts this. Phil, if I can ask you to read for us, please, text 8, outside meaning.
Can folks mute if they're not reading, please?
Yes.
Also?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Take a game like football. Some hypothetical visitor from a land to which football has not yet penetrated wants to understand the strange ritual which excites so much passion. You explain the rules of the game, what counts as a foul, what constitutes a goal, and so on. Fine, says the visitor, I now understand the game. What I don't understand is why you get so excited about it. Here you might have to launch into some larger reflection about games as ritualized conflict and the role of play in rehearsing skills needed in actual conflict. You might even suggest that ritualized conflict reduces the need for actual conflict, the football pitch as a substitute for the battlefield. There is an internal logic of the system, the rules of football, but the meaning of the system lies elsewhere and can only be understood through some sense of the wider human context in which it is set. To do this, you have to step outside the system, see why it was brought into being. There is no way of understanding the meaning of football by merely knowing the rules. They tell you how to play the game, but not why people do so and why they invest in it, the passion they do. The internal workings of a system do not explain the place the system holds in human lives. The meaning of the system lies outside the system. Therefore, the meaning of the universe lies outside the universe. Only something or someone outside the universe can give meaning to the universe.
Thank you, Phil. So in other words, if we have now elevated our conversation, we're no longer looking for meaning, now we're looking for purpose. The million-dollar question is, where do we find purpose? And the first thing we have is a signpost. That signpost points outside. Because within our lives, whatever we do is only going to be making our lives meaningful, because we exist within that paradigm already. We need to find something outside of us, something that precedes us, like the football game, right? If you want to understand really why football was invented, you need to figure out what was going on before football that they were trying to figure out, right? What is the purpose? And you're not going to find it by watching a football game or playing football. You're going to find it outside of football. You're going to find the reason why football exists. Similarly in our own lives as well. Now, how cruel would it be if God were to create a whole bunch of human beings, float them around in this on this green planet, right, and say to them, "Hold on a second, you guys float around, do whatever you want, knock your heads against the wall, come up with creative ideas of how you're going to find meaning in your life, etc., right, and never give us the actual purpose." Obviously, he has to give us, if we believe that God is kind and not cruel, he has to give us something that is going to instruct us, something that is going to guide us on how we can find the purpose of our lives. And the good news is we have something just like that. Text 9 on page 56 is from the Medrash, which tells us Alpayim Shana Kadma Torah L'Briyot Shalom, that the Torah's existence precedes the world by 2,000 years. In other words, before there was a world, there was a purpose for the world. And that's the Torah. And when we come down into this world, what happens? God says to us, I want you to have my Torah. Why do I want you to have my Torah? I want you to have my Torah because I want you to be able to seek, to look inside it and gain insight into a window of perspective that transcends you, that precedes you, which is the Torah, which precedes the creation of the world. In other words, yes, it's true. The Torah was given to us in the year 2248, right? To creation as per the Jewish year, but the Torah itself existed before the creation of the world, and the world was created in order to fulfill the purpose which is written in the Torah. And this is why it's so important to make sure to turn to the Torah to look for our own purpose. Because at some point, the ongoing experiment of curating a comfortable and meaningful life begins to collapse under its own weight. A society that prioritizes pleasure, that prioritizes freedom, that prioritizes, even if it's through meaningful channels, it doesn't make a difference. It cannot hold itself together. There has to be an outside glue that anchors the world, that keeps it firm. And this tension is vividly captured in a famous parable that I'm sure some of you here are familiar with, that Rabbi Akiva said to his students. Ron, can you read first, please? On page 59, the fox and the fish.
Once the wicked Roman government issued a decree forbidding Jews from studying Torah. Papas ben Yehuda came upon Rabbi Akiva, who was publicly gathering groups and teaching Torah. He said to him, Akiva, aren't you afraid of the authorities? Rabbi Akiva replied, let me tell you a parable. A fox was walking along a river and saw fish darting back and forth. He said to them, why are you why are you fleeing? They answered, from the nets that people have cast for us. Said the fox, why don't you come up onto dry land and live with me, just as your ancestors lived with mine? The fish said to him, Are you the one they call the cleverest of animals? You're not clever, you're foolish. If we're in danger even here in the place that gives us life, how much more so if we leave it for a place where we can't survive? The same is true for us, Rabbi Akiva concluded. If we're at risk even while studying Torah, the source of our life, as it says, for it is your life and the length of your days, how much worse would it be if we abandon it?
Rabbi Akiva is making the same calculation that Esther made. Remember? What did Esther say? As soon as Mordechai shifted the conversation from being about meaning to instead being about purpose, she says, I'm willing to give my own life for it. Rabbi Akiva says the same thing. He says, without Torah, I have no purpose. Rabbi Akiva says, without Torah, I have no purpose. There is no purpose to life. Yes, it's true, I can come out of the water, I can come out of the Torah, and I'll have a better life. But that would be a life of meaning. It wouldn't be a life of purpose. And it turns out that once you see that, you can't unsee it. Once you appreciate that your life has to be full of purpose, and not meaning you have to figure out what the purpose of life is, and not just meaning, you cannot unsee that anymore. And this is indeed the conclusion that King Solomon comes to. We opened up today's lesson by asking a question. King Solomon was the wisest of all men, the richest of all men. He had all this wonderful, right? He built towers and had servants and palaces and things. The whole shebang. He even accomplished great accomplishments. In other words, he checked all 4 boxes from last week, and yet he still seemed to say they were futile. Where did he finally find meaning? At the end of the book, he says so. The final words of Kohelet, of Ecclesiastes, on page 60. Here we are. David Morris, you want to read for us? The bottom line, King Solomon tells us his conclusion. Don't forget to unmute yourself, David. David, with us here? David Morrison, you want to read for us?
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead.
The end of the matter, after everything is considered, revere God and keep his commandments, because that's what it means to be human.
That's what it means to be human. Full stop. Isn't that amazing? In other words, King Solomon understood that without Torah, a person cannot be a human being. And this is the secret. You can spend your whole life chasing meaning and still feel empty. Because meaning, as valuable as it is not the same as purpose. Meaning asks, what makes me feel alive? Purpose asks, what am I alive for? We're not here to chase experiences. It's not YOLO. It's not bucket lists. We're here to fulfill a mission. You can do all those things. It's fine. They might give you a rush of pleasure. They might even give you a rush of meaning. But when we live that way, eventually we will feel empty. Why? Because in the end, the question is not what do I need to be happy? It is what am I here for? And how can I live that right now? So now we know where to look for purpose. If purpose lies outside the system, if it comes from the Creator rather than from within creation, then the only place to find it is in the Torah, which predates the world and which carries the imprint of its designer. Torah is not just what... Last week's lesson was one path among many. It was Judaism giving you its approach to meaning. But the Torah is not just one path among many for leading a meaningful life. The Torah is the only place to find a purpose for which the world was created. The Medrash tells us that when God created the world, the Torah was the blueprint for the world. Think of like a mission statement for a company. They keep looking at that mission statement and then they create the company based on that mission statement. And then somebody comes to you later and says, well, let's see if we can live a meaningful life where life will be meaningful and also we'll have the mission statement of the company. No, if it's not living up to the mission statement, there's no purpose of it. The whole company can cease to exist if it's not fulfilling its mission statement. That's what the Torah is to the world. The Torah to the world is the mission statement, the blueprint, the opening lines for which God looks into when he wants to create the world. And then those clues that we find in the Torah That becomes our mission. And this leads us, obviously, to the much, much bigger question.
Lesson 2.
Hold on. That leads us to the much bigger question. Okay, I know where to find my purpose, right? But can you tell me what that purpose actually is? What does the Torah say I'm here to do? What is the mission that makes me indispensable in this world? That's why lesson 2 is not enough. And I invite you all to join me next week as we take our next step in this journey together and we add the additional layer. Now that we know why the Torah is the only place to find the answer, we will look into the Torah to understand what is that blueprint, what is that model that the Torah gives us for leading a meaningful life. Please turn your attention to the video screens for a summary of today's lesson.
Lesson 2. To make or not to make meaning. 1. The question about searching for the meaning of our lives is a distraction. Meaning is subjective. It refers to anything I deem to be enriching, inspiring, and beneficial. There's a more important question we need to answer. What is our purpose? Purpose is objective and focuses on what I am needed for at any given moment, irrespective of personal feelings, preferences, and benefits. 2. God created us intentionally, so our lives are inherently purposeful. There is a mission that precedes our coming into the world, and Judaism wants us to ask, what is my purpose, rather than just, what do I find meaningful? 3. Purpose isn't dependent on circumstances, because if God put us in a certain situation, there is certainly purpose in it for us. 4. Purpose can't be discovered from inside the system. It must come from outside the system. Only from beyond existence can we find the purpose for which the entire system was established. The Torah, conceptually, precedes the world. It is not part of creation. It is from beyond the system. 5. A society that prioritizes pleasure and freedom, even if pursued through meaningful channels, cannot hold together. With no higher calling and no objective reason for being here, we float freely, and meaning disappears. For us Jews, Torah is the only space where our soul can imbibe life-sustaining purpose.
Thank you all for joining us for Lesson 2. This has been To Make or Not to Make Meaning. And I look forward to seeing you all next week for Lesson 3, which is titled Meaning in the Mundane. Thank you all for joining us.